You know what's funny, folks? Um, of course, I was talking about, because this was brought up to my attention, everybody else's attention, that Ken Penders, he plans to, as he puts it, try to release the entire Archie Sonic comic book series in collectible volumes. And, despite the fact that I and others pretty much feel that this is a very foolish idea, and there is no way personally he's going to be able to do this because, it's one thing to, reprint the Mobius 25 years later story arc to sort of serve as the origins, the prelude to his Lara Sue Chronicle series. It's one thing to probably do that, because that's just like a few. That's just basically like, two and a half full issues, of a comic. And it's more of a, as some people would put it, a what if scenario, even though Ken Penders has gone on record as saying that that is the definitive future. And a part of me does believe him, when it comes to that, because when he says that, that's the definitive future, he's not saying that, just because he's pretty much spoiling the outcome of the Wolverine Robotnik, Eggman, if you will. But he's also saying it's a future to where there are still other threats. There are other scenarios, they have to deal with, and potential aftermaths, of the victory that they have to work around, they have to deal with as well. So when he says it's the definitive future, a part of me kind of believes him because of all of that. So him trying to reprint that as part of the Lara Sue Chronicles is one thing. But again, trying to do the entire series, which includes works not just by him, but by other writers that he worked alongside with, or at the same time with, or semi worked, or simultaneously, I should say, not semi, but simultaneously worked alongside with, as well as the works of people like Ian Flynn and Ian's wife Aaliyah and Evan Stanley when, they worked on the book. That's a whole different scenario in itself. But what's interesting, though, is somebody brought something up to my attention, and I'm going to try to pull it up here on my phone. If not, I'll look it up on my computer. But what they brought to my attention was this. And this was really interesting, to say the least. I don't know if I can read it very well here. I might have to go to my computer and look it up. But basically, what they posted, and I'm going to bring it up here in a second, because what I did is I emailed it to my text messaging so I can have it on my phone just in case. But let me see. I got it here somewhere. And everything. Here we go. It's like the top one, I think. Yeah, it's the top one here. Let's bring it up. Okay, so this is what Ian said. This is something that Ian said, and somebody, I think it was the Twitter/X user, Nicole the Links, that posted this, and they found it at Archive of our, and they found, I think it was them, or it was somebody on Twitter. I think it was either Nicole the Links at twitter.com, or it was JT Thrum, I think, that posted it. I'm not really sure. Somebody did. But they got this off of archive.org, in the Way Back Machine section. And this was from Ken Penders himself. On July 31st, 1999. Now, this precedes me moving out on my own by 10 months, almost 10 to 9 months, if you will. But anyway, this is what he said, and he posted this at 12:58 a.m. Central Time on July 31st, 1999, 25 years ago at the end of this month. This is what he posted, and he said, because somebody, had asked him a question about SEGA owning characters like Julie Sue and St. John, and this was Ken Penders' answer at that time on July 31st, 1999. This is Penders' response to, somebody asking him that question about SEGA owning those characters. This was Ken Penders' response. This is what Penders said, and Penders said, and I quote, As part of the contract SEGA has with Archie stipulates, okay, let me read that. This is what the contract states. Well, not contract. This is what Ken Penders. This is what Ken Penders said back, back in 1999, on July 31st, 1999, 25 years ago at the end of this month, when somebody asked him, about, SEGA owning the characters that he created, like Julie Sue and St. John. And this was Pender's response. This was Ken Pender's response right here at 5 minutes and 40 seconds. This was his response back then, 1999. He said, and I quote, "Part of the contract SEGA has with Archie stipulates any and all characters created in the Sonic and Knuckles comic books become property of SEGA, the sole exceptions being Sonic Super Special number 7 and 10 for obvious reasons. Thus, SEGA now owns everything I created in the Knuckles series, including Locke, Lara Lee, and Julie Sue, to say nothing of characters like Geoffrey St. John, Hershey, Dr. Quack, and Robble the Hitch, to name but a few. As a professional, I knew that going in and had," he says, "as a professional, I knew that going in and had no qualms at the time. Now that I'm creating my own series, however, I must admit certain ideas will probably never make it into the Sonic books, as I'm keeping those for my own use. Maybe one day SEGA will even use them. Hey, now there's an idea." So, basically, by his own admission, 25 years ago this month, at the end of this month, July 31st, by his own admission, what Ken's saying is that every character, and I think this is one of the things people are bringing up in the past few years in light, if not the past few years, but in the past decade, since the lawsuit occurred, they, allowed him to have control of these characters. What people pointed out is things like this, that by his own admission, he's saying, I don't own these characters anymore. I don't own Julie Sue. I don't own Geoffrey St. John. I do not own Hershey the Cat. I do not own Knuckles' mom, Lala Lee, or Linda, or Julie Sue's stepsister, Linda, or any of them. I don't own any of these characters or stories that I've created. They all, part of the agreement, all belong to SEGA, and by extension Archie, but mostly SEGA. And again, this is something that I think people are pointing out. They're pointing to things like this that he said on his own admission, even 2.5 decades ago. He's saying, look, he's saying basically, look, I'm giving up, all rights to these characters. These characters belong to SEGA now. I do not own them. I just created them, and part of the agreement is because I created them and put them, had them, debut in the comic, they are now part of SEGA. SEGA now owns every single one of them. Now, I can understand people saying, well, times change, and people might change, their minds about certain things that they say they don't have ownership over anymore. And that might be true, but again, this is by Ken's own admission 25 years ago. And again, these are things people are finding all over the internet ever since the lawsuit occurred. And why in recent years, or over the past decade since that lawsuit happened, people have been bringing this to the forefront. They've been bringing this to the forefront to kind of maybe expose the fact that, hey, Ken lied to you guys. To let the courts, that Ken and Archie and SEGA, mostly Archie and Ken went to, to let those courts know, hey, this case that you basically forced into a settlement, the guy that you gave ownership to all these characters to, he lied. These are not his characters. These are SEGA's characters. By extension, not Archie's characters, but mostly SEGA's. This is why, when you hear this is how it relates to what Ken has announced and what he's doing with the Lara Sue Chronicles. This is why people worry about what he's planning to do. this is why they worry about him doing the thing with the La Rosu Chronicles and using the Mobius 25 years storyline as a prologue for that series, as a reprint in the book. And this is why they worry that he's probably going to try to cross a line that he's not going to be able to come back from or even win, because of the fact that, he wants to reprint an entire series that contains characters he has no right to, and by his own admission, even 2.5 decades ago, he gave up right to. So yeah, when you look at these things pop up, and along with other things people pointed out throughout the past several years, since the lawsuit happened, and it really makes you think. It really makes you think if Penders mentally may have early signs of, I wouldn't say Alzheimer's or dementia, but memory loss. Like he can be sharp as a tack, and be focused on what he needs to take care of, and remember certain things. But is there a chance he could have memory loss, as well? Like he forgets, certain other things that are important. That makes you really think that. I'm not saying he has dementia or Alzheimer's, that I'm not saying that. I'm saying there's a good chance he might have, little bits of memory loss here and there where he forgets things. Like somebody can point, like if somebody points that out to him, maybe that might trigger something in his mind. He'll be like, oh yeah, I did say that, didn't I? And if they point that out to the courts, as well as some of the other evidence they've been finding, who's to say Ken is not going to face a lot of backlash? I'm not, no, look, I'm not saying he will face a lot of backlash, but I'm just saying this is, this is a situation that I think Ken has to, again, as I've talked about and everybody else has talked about, Ken has to really reconsider. Because again, if he's saying by his own words, his own admission, 2.5 decades ago, that, hey, I created these characters for the comic, and by doing so, I gave up ownership of them to SEGA, and to SEGA and to Extension Archie Comics. If him, by his own admission, he's admitting to that, in this statement from 2.5 years ago, then that can, things like that can get used against him. Things like that can get used against him, and he could be in a lot of trouble. This is why, people have to understand. We get what Ken's trying to do, and we respect what he wants to do to an extent, but we also realize the possible major lawsuit he can get himself, into with SEGA of all people, because SEGA, they have lawyers, and the kind of lawyers are the ones that would basically, go through every nook and cranny and, see if there's any evidence that they can put against this guy. And once they do, they might come across stuff like this and be like, hey, if these are your own admission words of, hey, I gave up these characters, then again, all of that can come out in the open, and it can get revealed that he lied. He lied the entire time. And, some people might say, okay, well, why would he lie? And again, people might equivalent to potentially him having maybe signs of dementia or maybe major signs of memory loss. We don't know. We don't know. But again, I look at this, and I read this words in his own admission, of his own admission, I should say. I read this, and it's like you hear what he wants to do now. You hear what he's in the process of doing with the Law Suit Chronicles and Mobius Years Later. And it's, again, the Mobius Years Later thing, that may not be a big deal because most of those stories, when the issues combine to maybe like 2.5, maybe 3 issues, at most. But when you hear him wanting to take that next step, and, You know, so hold on. My mom's on the phone, my middle sister, right now, so I do apologize if I'm a little distracted. But like I said, if like I said, it's one thing for him to do the whole thing with the Laura Sue Chronicles, the Mobius is later. That's one thing. But this, where he wants to reprint the entire series, that's something I don't think he's going to be able to get away with, because again, you got stuff like this coming out. You got stuff like, the other stuff being pointed out, and just, again, for people, look, like I was trying to say before I got a little distracted there, we appreciate and respect what he's trying to do, but we also don't want him to get himself in any legal trouble. We don't. Because what could get pointed out, as to why he's doing this, is he might be suffering from memory loss. Like he doesn't remember, agreeing or saying certain things or agreeing to certain terms until somebody points it out to him. So yeah, I'm just, I'm just like, I look at this, and I'm like, Ken, you might want to reconsider. Because again, we get your intention. And yeah, like I was trying to say before I got distracted, people might not think much about these stories, but guess what? If you're trying to reprint an entire comic series, not just your stories, but everybody else's stories, including a few people that currently are tied to SEGA as we speak, that's a big risk you're taking. That's a big risk you're taking, and I cannot. I cannot. What's the one I'm looking for? I cannot see this ending very well for you. Because by your own admission, even 25 years ago, even if you don't remember saying that, you basically admitted that all these characters, these stories, even the ones you created, belong to SEGA. That's by your own admission. And this is why when we tell people, this is kind of a big deal, and he needs to take it seriously, and yes, we can respect what he wants to do. What he wants to do may not become a reality because of because of the characters involved. And it's not just characters and stories involving involving his characters or stories he created, but it's also involving Sonic. It's involving Amy. It's involving Knuckles, Tails, SEGA characters, if you will. And SEGA, once they get wind of it, they're going to shut him down. Don't be surprised if you hear something coming out of San Diego Comic-Con. Well, they're going to shut him down trying to sell any of those Laura Sue Chronicles beginnings books because of what's inside. Don't be surprised. I'm not saying it will happen, but don't be surprised. But I am going to say this. Ken needs to reconsider. He needs to reconsider. I get the fact that he's getting the ball rolling. He's going to try to go through all the right channels, get permission and everything from all the people he needs to get permission from. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to matter. Because by his own admission, that's 25 years ago to this month, he basically states SEGA owns everything that he created. And this is why people worry. Because now it's like, because now it's like you're taking a big risk by saying, hey, I'm going to reprint stories involving SEGA's mascot. And that's a line you don't cross. But anyway, though, guys, I just wanted to come on here and talk about that. Sorry for the bit of distraction during this. Like I said, my mom's on the phone, my middle sister talking to her, and she's not on a speaker, so I do apologize. But anyway, just thought I'd talk about this, bring this up. Let me know what your thoughts are down below. Comment if you like. And until next time, I am out.